Winnipeg is somewhat of a unique real estate market. What trends have you seen in multifamily development in the city, and how do you think it compares to other Canadian markets?
Winnipeg is typically a little bit behind the times. We don't have major high rises being built here. We don't have amenity rich multifamily until I would say the last few years. A major differentiator between Winnipeg and other cities is we don't have a highway. So the infrastructure in Winnipeg is a lot different. It takes a while sometimes to get around. I think it is a place where there is very limited institutional investment, and we view that as a good thing because eventually it will come. We will hit a critical mass of 1 million people. Once we see that kind of number cross, you'll see a bit of a snowball effect, which should be good for any existing owners because there will be more demand for the assets.
How do you leverage technology and software to streamline your processes and enhance the tenant experience?
I think that's something that Sandy and Robert have really been drivers of from the outset. He's really impressed it upon the staff that we need to focus on that, and we need to have the right people that can help us leverage the technology that's out there to automate business processes so that our staff can spend more time building those relationships, spending time on site, learning what our tenants need, doing a little bit more market research as opposed to preparing a lease renewal.
Welcome to the Mastering Property Management Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Sarbit. Join me as we delve into candid conversations with industry experts to uncover their strategies and insights for achieving success in property management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, let's elevate your property management skills together. Hi, everybody. I'm Jared Sarbit, and this is Mastering Property Management. Today, I have the honor and privilege of having Alex Akman on, the Chief Operating Officer of Shindico. Alex, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Jared.
Yeah, my pleasure. Alex, tell me a little bit about Shindico, but also there's kind of another component here. There's also Akman Management. So if you can kind of tell me about both companies and how they've recently come together.
Shindico is a full-service real estate company, and our focus is always property management. We consider ourselves to be property managers first, but we also have a large development business and are vertically integrated from a general construction perspective, whereby we can execute our own projects. We have about 180 properties under management, a large portion of which are retail and multifamily, and the majority of what we're managing, we have ownership in. It's very important that a lot of our staff think like owners, and that's something that we think sets us apart from some of the competition. And then from a development perspective, we're able to employ a lot of our findings and learnings from property management and port them over to hopefully avoid some issues with design or issues with the building before they happen. As it relates to Akman Management, the Akman group of companies was a business that my great-grandfather founded. He arrived in Canada in the early 1900s as a carpenter and started doing some construction, built a building for himself, was doing a little bit of third-party construction, and then my grandfather took it to the next level. Also acting as a general contractor, but when he would do a building and earn some money, he would then turn around and build something for himself and also manage that building. So my father was involved on the management side and my uncle was involved on the construction side. And those two businesses split in 2012. And since then, my father has been operating the management business until 2023 when it merged with Shindico.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Incredible story of the the family passing down. It's rare that you see that succession. From one family, the father to the son to the next son, and that's really beautiful to hear. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your personal career path. What are some of the major milestones along the way, and how did you reach the current level of success as a chief operating officer at Shindico?
I'm from Winnipeg. I went to the same high school for 12 years in Winnipeg. Still have a lot of the same friends from my high school days. However, I did go to the University of Toronto, which was a real eye-opener, I would say, as it compared to, I think, some of what my friends were doing at U of M, and certainly compared to high school. I found that when I arrived there, I felt like I was behind some of the Ontario students. And it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. The school itself was very hard. You're part of a student body that's about 70,000. Your grades are all curved to 60% or 65%, regardless of the class. And then you go to graduate and you're applying for jobs. Of course, the first litmus test is GPA. and half the students at U of T will be 60 or 65 and under, and half the students at Ivy are over 80, because instead of curving to 60 or 65, they curve to 80. So you have a huge disadvantage going into that recruitment cycle. My grades in university were okay in the first year, bad in the second year, and good in the third and fourth year. When I kind of figured it out and had a group that I could do projects with and study with. But that was an eye-opening event, graduating into a bit of a soft job market in 2012, still kind of feeling the effects of 2008. Not a lot of students in my class got jobs out of the gate. I was fortunate enough to get one at a company called Capco that's owned by Fidelity. It's effectively a technology consulting firm, and we were doing a large system implementation for TD Bank after they had acquired the MBNA credit card business. Really wasn't what I wanted to do. I knew that I always had a passion for real estate, but it wasn't easy to get one of those jobs in Toronto. I met my wife, I guess now wife, in Toronto in 2010, and she wasn't graduating until 2014. So I know I had to stick back for a couple of years. I graduated in 2012. So I did that. I ended up quitting the job at Capco without another job, which was a huge mistake, because it's hard to get another job when you don't have one. Everyone told me that, but I didn't listen to them, of course. So subsequent to that, I ended up writing the GMAT and the LSAT. I had scholarship offers to Western for Ivy and for their law school, but I really didn't want to be a lawyer. So that wasn't really the path that I wanted to go down. Basically taking 3 years of school and articling and passing the bar to then never practice law. And I also applied to do the CPA CMA program at the time. I wanted to learn more about tax. So I went the CPA route. I learned absolutely nothing about tax, but I do think that it was a valuable learning experience and certainly lots of applicable skills that I can carry forward to my job now.
Amazing. And then tell me a little bit about once you started with Shindico. So you started what year was it that you started?
I think it was January 2015, I think. It's been a little while. I started as a property administrator at the time, which is kind of the entry level position at the office. I was doing accounts receivable. I liked it a lot. I knew that if I was working at a real estate company in Winnipeg, I did at the time, I thought Shindico was the place to be, and it turned out that it seems like that was the case. And yeah, just started kind of doing tasks outside of the regular day-to-day, gained the confidence of some of the folks in the office that I was reliable and would produce with a reasonable output the first time, and, not ask silly questions and do the two things that I think are most important in an employee. You try and you care.
Yes, amazing. And so, did you go into did you see quite a few different positions before you got into the COO role, or did you just kind of quickly move into that role, or?
Yeah, so there's a 3-year rotation in property administration. I did that, where you do a few different roles. Then I was a property manager for a number of years. Had a portfolio of properties, still act as a property manager, still have a few properties where I am on and I am the property manager for them. That never really leaves us at this office. You always need to have your fingers on the pulse as it relates to property management if you want to get into the development side or acquisition side. So again, you kind of know operationally what you're dealing with and where there may be some synergies or efficiencies or additional return that you can extract. So yeah, no, I've had a few different positions at the office. And I think it's generally a pretty flat organization. We're not super fussed on titles. But yeah, it's been a good run.
Awesome. And how has your education that you mentioned helped apply to what you do today?
So I found that the University of Toronto's objective was to make every business case into a math problem. So there was a huge math component in commerce, which I don't know is common elsewhere. I think there's a little bit more qualitative components at other universities. So that's helped me, because a lot of what we do on the finance side is numbers. Basically, a real estate acquisition or development is time value of money and a Corp Fi problem. So that's translated fairly well. And same with some of the learnings from CPA. Of course, you're reading an income statement every month for a property. every property is almost like a little business. So knowing how the journal entries tie and how the balance sheet ties to the income statement and how to run a GL and comb through it and do some bank recs, it all kind of comes together. Our industry is such where we say that we're a jack of all trades, but masters of none. We have lots of breadth, but not a ton of depth in specific categories.
Wow. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the transition from Akman to Shindico. So the family ownership, going into Shindico must have been a significant change for Akman management and your father and family. Can you share, your experience of that journey of the two coming together? What was it like, selling Akman property management after 100 years of family ownership?
Yeah, I was working at Shindico throughout. And so one of my dad's long-term employees unfortunately fell ill and needed to step away quickly. At the time, I think my father was about 70 years old, so also approaching retirement. Was recently put on dialysis as well at home. So that was even more reason to try and find a bit of an off ramp. A lot of the business at Akman was condo management, which can be quite stressful and entails a lot of evening and weekend work. So we were managing our own portfolio, we were managing some third party buildings, and we were doing a lot of condo. I had absolutely no desire to do any condo management. So it was a matter of finding a solution that worked for both parties. In terms of the transition, we didn't end up selling the condo business. We just let the contracts ride out. We provided notice to all the owners and said, you should go find a property manager that you're comfortable with. You don't need to listen to who we want to sell to. And I don't think that's what most people would have done. I think they would have just taken the revenue and the customer would have been left with whoever the customer was left with. That wasn't how my dad wanted to go out, because he had built a lot of those condos. So they were condo developers. He had sold those units to some of those people, and then he was servicing them for 30, 40 years. And I don't think that was the reputation that he wanted. So we just let it, gave them lots of notice, said, interview different property managers, will help you with the transition. And that's what we did. And Shindico took over our portfolio, some commercial, some res, and the third party portfolio, as well as all of our staff. A few staff ended up going in a different direction as part of the merge. However, everyone that came over is still here unless they moved out of province. One person moved out of province. So that's always nice to see. And that was obviously a huge consideration for my dad because he had lots of long-term staff and wanted to make sure that they were looked after. And obviously gracious for Shindico to take them. However, Shindico also needed labor, and we had some good people. So I think it was a good fit from both sides, and everyone has fit in fairly seamlessly here. So I think it's been good for both parties.
Amazing. So are you out of condos? Like, do you have no more condos at all, or do you still have? No kidding.
No more condo management.
Interesting. What about condo management did you not like versus the commercial?
The property management is already very hard. And when you start adding in additional constraints like a reserve fund or like a budget or like one owner's wish out of 100, maybe it's the right thing, maybe it's the wrong thing, but it takes time and you need to go through it and you need to have a discussion with the owner, etc. And if it's the wrong thing, you've just spent a lot of time, which is money in our world, kind of going down a rabbit hole that you probably would never have gone down if you were the owner and you were the property manager and doing everything as one. It's also a lower margin business. It's typically invites more competition because you don't need as much capital to get into it. And we found that for us to do it the way that we wanted to do it, it really wasn't that profitable. Because you end up having way more labor than the competitors do, because we think that's what you need to properly service the buildings. And, it ends up being viewed as a commodity, as it relates to different condo corps going out for bid. Usually they're just going to go with the low bid. And we weren't good, I would say, at winning the work. We were good at doing the work. Sandy always says there's two kinds of property managers, those that can do it and those that can win it. There's very few that are good at both. And I think that's true. We were not that good at going out and doing business development, but we had a lot of long-term contracts because the folks saw the value in what we were doing. So it's just a different business, and as it relates to the portfolio and the stability of staffing and offering a higher quality of work, I think all of those things go hand in hand with more owned management, I would say. All the contracts are sticky. You can do way more planning as it relates to staffing and resources and the business. Whereas if you have a big condo contract and it rolls off and the board changes and you don't get a renewal, you have a big problem now.
Yeah. No kidding. And so the 180 properties that you under Shindico now, are they kind of a mixed use? Is it retail, industrial, office, or is it a specific
It's approximately 180, and that number is changing by the week as we have another property under contract right now that we're hopefully going to close on in the next week or two, or at least lift conditions. It's mostly retail. There's a bigger push on multifamily over the last number of years. So we have acquired some large multifamily assets with a few partners. And we also have done an industrial development on land that we had purchased from QuadReal, about 23 acres. So we've developed so far about 100,000 square feet, and we have an 84,000 square foot building wrapping up there right now. We're always in acquisition mode where we can be. We did write an offer on a couple multifamily assets last week. We did not get them, unfortunately. So we do find that we're, writing way more offers than we're winning, but that's okay. And our focus continues to be on retail and multifamily. If we're doing industrial, it's typically ground up development. We don't like to buy existing industrial buildings in Winnipeg because there's not a lot of good stock. And it's really hard to retrofit the buildings to make them Class A industrial. With a shopping center, as long as it has parking and is orientated to the street properly, we can put on a new facade, we can put on a new parking lot, we can put on a new roof, and it'll look brand new. We can't chop the roof off an 18-foot clear building and make it 28-foot clear. We can't extend the back of the building to asphalt that doesn't exist because the trucks aren't 40 feet anymore, they're 53 feet. So that's kind of why we shy away from existing industrial. Our focus on the retail side, especially from an acquisition perspective, is always to have future development sites. So when we're buying a shopping center, we want to make sure that 10, 15, 20 years down the road, it may be an amazing multifamily development site.
Okay, brilliant. So what does your day-to-day look like, Alex? It sounds like, I imagine you're living very much a life of an entrepreneur. It sounds like there's always moving pieces, doing things different every day. Where do you find yourself spending a lot of your time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think anyone in property management would tell you every day is different. You wake up and you never know what's going to be in your inbox. It could be a fire. It could be a thank you from a tenant for sponsoring a Thanksgiving dinner. So it's different. I mean, we're busy right now in that we're growing. We have a lot of acquisitions on the go. We have a lot of development projects on the go. We've just recently started our construction company, so we're ramping that up from a staffing perspective. Last year we had one person. I think we're up to 6 now. So that's going pretty well. And we have basically an unlimited pipeline of work. We just have to find the right people to join the business and join us to execute those projects. As it relates to the day-to-day, I usually start my day very early at the computer, well before 7. Find that I can get a lot of work done before 8:30 or 9, almost a full day's worth of emails, work, etc., so that I'm available for other staff and for any questions they may have, and to assist on projects that are ongoing, or to visit with a tenant, or to assist with a lease renewal, or really just support the team however I can during the day. And then typically go home at 5 o'clock on the dot to see my kids, because if I don't do that, then I won't see them. With them for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then usually back to work for a couple hours and kind of do it all over. I like the job a lot, and I like the industry, and I have a lot of friends in the industry, and we can go for a beer and talk about work, and it's not work. So I think it works quite well in that regard.
Amazing. Really, really nice. So as a property manager, or maybe a leader of a team of property managers, there's various stakeholders in your business. How do you ensure effective communication and foster positive relationships with, the property owners, the tenants, the contractors, and everyone in between?
I think having empathy is really important, and being able to put ourselves in other people's shoes and think about how we would feel if we were them is one thing that I think we do pretty well. And our mandate is succeeding by helping others succeed, and I think that requires empathy. So I think that's kind of the first starting point. We have a lot of long-term tenants, a lot, and that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by building a relationship with them and supporting them, and often leaving a little bit on the table. Sometimes you can't maximize everything, and often the best deals are the ones where both parties have to give a little. So I do find that we are, while sometimes perceived to be tough, I think that generally once the tenant is in the space, we want them to succeed. We don't want a vacancy, and we can work with people, and we do. As it relates to vendors and contractors, I mean, we expect value. There's no doubt that our expectations are high. However, we also have a lot to offer. We have tons of volume, and we can pay without relying on a check from an owner or checking a bank account. We can pay net 30, and we really strive to do that. However, in exchange for that, we want the best service and the best price. I often say that we should be treated like Walmart. You can get your volume from us. You can cover your fixed costs and your overhead with just our work. And then you have a base, and you can go and get some other work that's more profitable and earn your money that way. I think that we were in a market condition where there was just too much work, and we've seen that subside over the last 12 or 18 months. And the contractors that rode with us, I would say, and were reasonable to us during that period, still have lots of work. I'll give you an example. The roofer that we like to use, and who has been competitive and low on almost all of our jobs over the last few years, because he says, I just take less of a margin because I know you guys are going to pay, and I know I can fill up a bit of my book that way, and then I'll go win a few other jobs. Great. He called me last week and said, I want to meet with you to see what you have in 2025 so I can reserve some space. I'm getting busy, and I'm getting calls from other roofing companies saying, I have no work. Do you have anything that you can sub to me? Well, the other roofing companies that are calling him, we had experience with, and were either high bids or poor quality of work. So it does come full circle, and it's really important that folks not try and gouge or take advantage when the times are good, because the pendulum does swing.
Oh, such a great example. And I love as you know, I've had Sandy on the podcast, and I love the succeeding by helping others succeed. Like, that's just such a powerful statement. And that was a really good example of that. And, finding the people that will be loyal to you from in the hard times and the good times. And yeah, that's amazing. Kind of a side question of it. I would love to hear that, I imagine you've learned a lot from Sandy and Robert, the founders of Shindico. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what are the things that you have learned from them as leaders?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty amazing mentors. They have a lot of time for the staff, I would say. Everyone's treated very well at the office. We recently started a social committee. I think that's been a really strong thing for staff, and to bring them together. This week we had a paint night and brought in Chinese food from one of our tenants. So we're really promoting that on social media, and I think it shows in our retention. I think that as it relates to other property management firms, we must have the highest retention of anyone in Winnipeg. I think that from what I've seen, Sandy and Robert don't live very extravagant lives. They put a lot of the profits, et cetera, back into the business, so that there's always growth, and there's always something for people to do, and there's always a career opportunity for someone to move up if they want to. And really treating people like you want to be treated, I think, is important. But at the same time, being firm and fair. It's not succeeding by helping others. We want to succeed too. And we are a for-profit business, and we would like to make money. However, we have to be fair, and we have to be cognizant of what our customers are going through, and ensure that we're delivering value for them.
It's amazing. Yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall in meetings with Sandy and Robert. I imagine they're just so insightful, and yeah, they're wonderful people. That's for sure. So
Mhm.
very very good. Winnipeg is somewhat of a unique real estate market. What trends have you seen in multifamily development in the city? And maybe you could speak to the commercial development as well, because you do quite a bit of that too. And how do you think it compares to other Canadian markets?
I think that Winnipeg is typically a little bit behind the times. We don't have major high rises being built here. We don't have amenity rich multifamily until I would say the last few years. A major differentiator between Winnipeg and other cities is we don't have a highway. So the infrastructure in Winnipeg is a lot different than the GTA or than Calgary or than Edmonton because we just don't have that highway going through the city. It takes a while sometimes to get around. I think it is a place where there is very limited institutional investment. And we view that as a good thing because eventually it will come. We will hit a critical mass of 1 million people. I think we're about 800,000 now. I could be wrong. But I think once we see that kind of number cross, you'll see a bit of a snowball effect, which should be good for any existing owners because there will be more demand for the assets. And from what I've seen, it's very hard to bring on new supply here. Unlike Ontario, we don't have a municipal board that we can, or we kind of have one. We didn't have one for a number of years that we can appeal to. It's very hard to get entitlements. It's even harder to get a building permit. And all that does is benefit those who have existing property. I don't think that's the intention of the administration and of the government, but it's certainly a side effect of some of the policies and some of the NIMBYism because unless you're willing to cut off demand or cut off immigration, which I don't think anyone wants to do, we certainly don't want to do, and we need the labor, you need supply. There's no such thing as affordable housing without zoning and permits. You can put on as much rent control as you want. It's not going to work. So as it relates to Winnipeg, we find that it certainly does not have the upside that other markets may. We're not going to have a year where, or a series of years where rents go up 20% and values appreciate 10%, like the GTA or like Calgary on the right swing. However, unlike Calgary, we're also not going to have a time where it goes down 30% or 40% or where you have significant vacancy because of an industry like oil and gas over the last number of years. I know that we've transitioned away from that, or Calgary's transitioned away from that a little bit, and it's in a total renaissance right now. But in 2008, for example, it was kind of a blip for Winnipeg. I don't think that our economy was really hit that hard because it is so government driven. So we like it. We find that there's way less volatility and we can achieve returns that we're comfortable with. And ultimately, when you're dealing in real estate, you're typically using 3 turns of leverage and it can go awry quickly. So if you can stomp some of the volatility out and take a little bit less and have a long-term view, we find that it works quite well here.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. How do you leverage technology and software to streamline your property management processes and enhance the tenant experience?
I think that that's something that Sandy and Robert have really been drivers of from the outset, and it's surprising and impressive. Folks in the office are often helping Sandy with his IT needs as it relates to iPhone, etc. So he'll be the first to admit that he's not a techie. However, he's really impressed it upon the staff that we need to focus on that and we need to have the right people that can help us leverage the technology that's out there to automate business processes so that our staff can spend more time doing not higher level tasks, but building those relationships, spending time on site, learning what our tenants need, doing a little bit more market research as opposed to preparing a lease renewal. So as it relates to other property management firms in Winnipeg, I'm 99% sure we're the most advanced technologically. From the perspective of folks apply for an apartments online, all the data is already keyed in the system. We approve them in the system. The system spits out a lease with their name and all of the RTB documentation and a welcome package all ready to go. Minimal data entry required from an analyst or from a property manager so that the analyst can spend more time engaging with that person. We have all kinds of other automation as it relates to how we track our work orders and we follow up on them and we log them, and how we deal with tenant insurance and vendor insurance and sales reporting and prompting tenants for notifications. So I don't think that automation will take over property management, because it's still such a personal touch business. But certainly it can help us eliminate some mundane tasks that no one really likes doing and that have a high chance for human error, so that we can spend time on the building. At the end of the day, if you have a roof leak and a tenant calls, probably the property manager that wins will be the one where you're speaking to a live person instead of a chatbot. At least that's how we feel. But that doesn't mean that the AI chatbot can't be used to ask a question as it relates to one of our internal processes, so that it can spit it out, so the staff doesn't need to go look it up, for example. So right now we've kind of had our, I'll call it cloud slash internet push. I was big on the cloud pre-COVID. Our IT company at the time was trying to sell us a new server for $55,000 or $60,000 to keep everything on-prem. I told Sandy and Robert that was a huge mistake, and we should just flip everything to the cloud now, because our Microsoft subscription allows for free file storage through OneDrive anyways. And then we got lucky because we were 100% cloud-based when COVID hit. And then I think everyone realized that was a good decision. And now we are cloud, 100% cloud based, have been for some time. So our focus now is on AI and how we can have our own internal model, to deliver on some processes that are specific to our business. We're cognizant of just leveraging things that are in the public domain and piping, a lot of confidential information into them.
Very cool. That's so nice. What a compliment to Shindico to have a young gentleman like yourself to come on and have that, unique perspective that Robert and Sandy might not necessarily have, to understand how important the cloud was and to foresee that. So
Yeah, they were so early on. I mean, they had two IT folks on staff making custom reports in Yardi probably 10, 15 years before I joined.
wow.
So they were always ahead of the curve in that regard.
Yeah.
And now, as an example, one of our senior accounting folks is a CA and also has a computer science degree. So we're always looking for those kind of unique skill sets, so that folks can leverage as much as they can inside, and you're not
Yeah.
needing to explain to a consultant what the business process is. They can just kind of do the fine tuning as it relates to the coding.
Awesome. Alex, you're a BOMA member, is that right? And you're fairly
Yes.
involved in BOMA?
Yeah, I'm on the board of BOMA Manitoba.
Right. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
BOMA's great. I think it's a great way for us to meet other folks in the industry, and meet other vendors and just engage with the community. I found it to be pretty valuable. We had won a Toby Award, the Building of the Year, for our head office in Winnipeg. It is certified BOMA Best Gold. However, we have to update that right now. So we're in the process of doing that. As it relates to advocacy, I think that BOMA Manitoba is fortunate to have a strong executive director, Tom Thiessen. He's been there since I joined. He's been there for a long time, and a lot of folks know him and respect him and will take his call and answer the phone. So they've been strong on some advocacy cases. The biggest and most important push, in my opinion, that BOMA should make that they haven't yet is to work with universities to create a university course within probably the business faculty that is specific to real estate or property management. Universities are always looking for career options for their students. Property management companies are always looking for labor. What a match made in heaven. And then ideally you would be coming into the industry with some general knowledge and skill set. So that's something that we've been trying to do in Manitoba with Red River Community College. It takes a lot of time and a lot of will. I don't think that there's roadblocks being thrown up, and I think the university is open to it, but ultimately someone needs to write the syllabus, and you need to have a course catalog, and you need to figure out who's teaching, and there's lots of moving parts to get to that point.
Yeah. No kidding. Very, very cool. I heard in Calgary a stat just yesterday, and this is related to just the condo property management world, but there's a $250 person shortage of condo property managers here in Calgary, or maybe it's Alberta. It might be Alberta, but yeah, what a brilliant idea to start getting that in the education, because every podcast I have, generally speaking, people fall into property management, and they're not really prepared into it, and it would just better the industry. It would give people jobs. There's a need for it. Yeah, brilliant, no brainer.
Yeah, like one of the things that we had a construction business too as part of Akman. And what I say to people is if you go to, in our instance, Red River College, and you take the construction management course, which is a 4-year course with 2 years of schooling and 2 years of co-op, where you're probably working on site for a BIRD or a PCL with the goal of then being a project manager in the office. Once you have that job, that's it. You're not going to make more money by transitioning to another industry. Maybe you'll jump companies, but you're going to be a project manager. You're not going to, for example, go from being a property manager to being the manager of a restaurant, which is possible, to potentially owning another business, to potentially being the GM of a manufacturing plant, or being a facility manager for WRHA. There's just so many different avenues that people can go to once they're in this industry. So it's ripe for turnover from that perspective. And there's not a lot of new people coming into it.
Yeah, huge need. Very insightful. If you could reflect on your family legacy and your own career, what do you hope to contribute to the future of Shindico and the property management industry as a whole?
I think from my perspective, it's been an easy transition because it's something that I've always grown up with and around. My summer jobs were working construction, probably pushing a broom on a job site, which was good, and shows you kind of a different side of the business. As it relates to Shindico, I think we just want to keep growing and have lots of opportunity for the team and for the staff. It's very much a team approach here. I'm only able to do what I'm able to do because of the other folks that are here to support me. So yes, I can go and chase acquisitions and do new developments, but only because there's someone here to manage it, and there's someone here to assist me with the administration, and there's Sandy and Robert in terms of capital and relationship, and there's construction folks. So it's very much a team-based approach. But I think we just want to keep growing and hopefully maintain our status as the premier property management firm in Winnipeg, and continue to manage and work on internal properties where we have ownership. We've been fortunate recently to take on partners on some acquisitions, mostly local family offices that we've had a relationship with for a number of years and may do other business with, but it's nice to offer them the opportunity to participate with us. It's very different than a REIT or I guess I would say a fee-based developer, because we're taking half the equity ourselves. So it's not a fee exercise to charge an acquisition fee and a development fee, etc. We very much need the equity returns on the project to work. And I think that's something that we want to keep doing. We want to have a reason to talk to other people and to help us keep growing, because eventually we may be tapped. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon, but it just allows us to do a little bit more and look at a little bit of other things. And you never know where those relationships are going to take you. I mean, you may end up getting another deal because you have this person as a partner in other property.
Amazing. Very cool. As a leader in property management, what advice would you give aspiring property managers, or just generally people in the real estate world, looking to climb the ranks and achieve similar levels of success as yourself?
I think I don't think it's hard. I think you need to want to do it. And I think a lot of people think they want to do it, but they don't put in the effort. I think that labor hours worked are highly correlated to success. I think that if you look at people who are successful, who maybe you aspire to be like, my guess is that they're not arriving at 8:30 and leaving at 5. And if they are now, my guess is that they weren't when they started their career or when they started kind of working their way up the ranks. I think a big driver of that is you have to, it's very cliche, but you have to do something that you like so that it isn't painful to be at work and it isn't hard to put in a little bit more time. I always tell new folks here, it's not that hard to come at 8 and leave at 5:30 instead of coming at 8:30 and leaving at 5. And it'll set you apart. It'll make a huge difference as it relates to your work. You may be able to do a special project or two or assist on something exciting outside of your regular day to day because you're putting in that extra roughly 5 hours a week. And then for me, it's what I alluded to earlier. The two most important things are pretty rudimentary. You have to try and you have to care.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that. Assuming janitorial is one of your largest ongoing costs. Although when I speaking to Sandy, it sounds like that's not a huge component of your vendor business.
It's just not because of the type of asset class that we have. So in terms of janitorial contracts, I would be surprised if we had 10, despite having as many properties as we have, because when you think of a retail center, we don't administer the janitorial contract for Sobeys. We don't administer it for their neighbor either. We administer it for our office building where we're the tenant. At an apartment building, there's not a janitorial contract based on our model because we're typically hiring staff, even if it's 20 suites, to clean the building and do showings and to support the office. So we're not having janitorial contracts at many of those buildings, even where we have, for example, a sixplex. One of our other caretakers will go and clean it to earn some money on the side. And we like to provide those opportunities to our folks when we can. So yeah, we have some. The most prevalent janitorial contract that we would have is where we have the federal government as a tenant, and as part of their lease, we are responsible for administering the janitorial component. So we have a few of those.
Interesting. Okay. And when you are hiring those, what kind of qualities are you looking for in a janitorial company?
So, for example, for the federal government, we like to work with people that they like to work with. So we'll often defer to the tenants. Oftentimes these businesses are not new. They're relocating from somewhere else. They may have a relationship with someone. So we'll ask them because as property managers, we want them to be happy. They're less likely to have an issue with the cleaning, complain, or have an issue with their rent if we are using vendors that they like and that they respect and that they trust. So we'll often defer to the tenants a little bit. Obviously, cost is important, but not always the most important. And so with the feds, for example, there's security clearance requirements for both the business and for the cleaner. So we find ourselves often using the same cleaning company who also does probably 90% of the cleaning for the feds in Manitoba. That also allows them to go a little bit above and beyond because they have an important client that they want to service, and they know that if they continue to service them, we'll probably keep calling them when we submit tenders, etc.
Great answer. Awesome. Very good. And now for some fun questions. If you could manage any famous property in the world, what property would that be and why?
Good question. Haven't spent a ton of time thinking about it. Probably something somewhere that I would want to live, which would be somewhere a little bit warmer than Winnipeg. With that being said, I don't love managing big properties unless we absolutely have to. I think that it's really nice to be able to get to know your tenants and get to know your customers. And as the property gets bigger, that just naturally becomes a little bit more challenging. So while nice from a business perspective, I don't consider it as prestigious per se. I think it's very nice to kind of have that personal touch with some tenants. We go to our apartment building that's 124 units down the street from our office. I know a lot of the tenants there, and you can say hello to them, and it's just also a different relationship than when there's an issue. And there will be an issue because there's issues at your house and you just don't have anyone to call.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Didn't give me an exact property, but yeah. I won't push you any further.
I'll leave it to your imagination. I'm flexible.
Sounds good. I like it. And then finally, if you could recommend any book for aspiring property managers, what book would that be and why?
So I took the CCIM course, which isn't one book, it's 4 books. But I think that's a really good avenue for folks in the industry because it shows you something different. It's not about operations or about how an HVAC unit works or how to fix a parking lot. It tells you why the tenant may have located in the area that they located in and makes you think a little bit more critically about their business and how some of what we're doing as managers and how we're amortizing some potentially recoverable costs or how we're doing a facade renovation may or may not impact their business. And then, of course, it provides robust teachings as it relates to analysis and acquisitions, which I like. I know it's not typical for every property manager, but it's good information to have. And I do think that one of the things that really sets us apart on the acquisition and development front is our focus on property management and our knowledge of property management, because we can see things that maybe other people don't see when they're going through diligence, and we can see where there may be upside or downside 5 years from now because we have 50 years of history to kind of look back on and see. So for example, is this parking lot big enough to pile snow? If it's not big enough to pile snow, then probably our CAM is going to be higher here than somewhere else, which may inhibit our ability to achieve the minimum rent we want or to recover the cost of that roof over 30 years instead of 40 years. So there's all kinds of different things that go into property management, acquisitions, development. And I think that CCAM kind of provides more of a broker's perspective, but important for property manager, because at the end of the day, all of your customers and revenue typically come through a broker channel. So you want to be able to think and talk like they do before the tenant gets in. And then once the tenant gets in, you have to be a manager. But I don't know that there's a quote unquote book on property management. I think the only way to learn it is via experience. We always say here that it's going to take you at least 18 months in any job so you can see a full cycle and see what happens in 12 months and then what the ramifications of that 12-month period are. So I've found that the best way to learn is from seasoned professionals like we have here, lots of folks with 30 plus years of experience. My father has been doing it for a long time. You need to have common sense. You need to be a problem solver. But at least that CCIM course allows you to engage with a different part of the industry that's so important and sometimes not forgotten. Property management and brokerage shouldn't have a combative relationship. You have to work together, and you have to find a way to get that tenant in for your owner.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. How long does that course take when you?
So I haven't finished it yet because I prefer to do the in-person classes, and in Winnipeg, it's like traveling schedule based on who needs it and when. I've taken 3 of them. I think if you wanted to do it, you could for sure do it in a year. A component of it, though, is actually doing transactions. I think that property managers can use renewals if they're doing their own renewals for that, or you don't get the designation, but you still have all the knowledge. There's also a large networking benefit from it. I mean, when you're doing it in Winnipeg, you're in the room with, if you're the property manager, lots of agents, and it gives you a reason to talk to them and get them and have them get to know you, and you to be able to tell them how you're going to make their life easy, and you're going to be able to help them do the deal and assist with the paperwork and have all the marketing materials they need handy, and what the age of the HVAC unit is and specs on the building, so that the deal can get done quickly, because it's very hard and getting harder to do these deals.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. Alex, it was so good to have you on. Where can people find you?
Thank you for having me, Jared. I'm on LinkedIn, but I have to admit I don't check it that often. Okay. Folks are welcome to email me, Akman, Aakman at Shindico.com, awesome. And check out the Shindico socials.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. It was a real pleasure having you on.
Yeah, it was great.
And wishing you much, much more continued success.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.